Okay, as usual, I'll sound check. Anybody who's in the chat, let me know if the sound is all right. Sorry for the delay. There was some annoying thing with the iPhone where it kept deleting stuff deleting stuff every time I synced up to my computer, so it kind of got me pissed off for a while. But anyway, we are continuing Marvel Star Wars 1977, and since I did that one last scene video, and because I want to just change things up a little from all the Risk of Rain 2 stuff, we're going to do some Jedi Outcast, the criminally underrated black sheep of the Jedi Knight series. Let's just see how this works. Yeah, it was way too low. Okay, there we go. That's better. Okay, so let me just make sure things are going smoothly here. Yeah, it was one of those annoying things with the phone. It kept saying, "Oh, this won't be. It was not confirmed," or "This is not confirmed," and so on and so forth. I'm putting on easy mode because, you know, I want to be able to focus as much as I can on the commentary for the comic. Once again, for anyone following along, there's a link to a website in the description where you can read the old comic along with me. And we're starting from issue number 74. The weird thing was with the last time, I was actually so far, I'd actually gotten past the point that I'd read before, which is why the stream ended up being so short. I had not expected to cover about 10 chapters or so in just over an hour. So that was kind of annoying, because I had hoped to get a lot more done that day, but I didn't expect to get that much done. What? Only small in the corner. It's perfectly fine on my screen. God damn it. Hold on. Let me try again. If not, I'll probably have to quit Streamlab and sort of try and restart this whole thing. At least, thank you, Soul of the Dragon, in the chat. At least you caught that. Well, again, so far it's completely full screen where I am. But yeah, it's still a stupid little corner thing. What the hell? Yeah, I'm probably going to have to try and restart this. Okay. Still, god damn it. Guess it's going to be Risk of Rain after all, because I am not going to bother wasting however many minutes it takes to figure out why it stopped working after I went back to adjust the volume. Hopefully, by the time of the next stream, it will be, this stupid problem will be gone. And Streamlabs is great stuff, but it is really finicky with programs sometimes. Sorry again, and for all these stupid delays. Yeah, and now I'm gonna have to readjust the volume. At least I can do that in game, at least to my satisfaction anyway. Maybe it's because I was in a lousy mood going into this. Sometimes I don't know why, but sometimes is when I get pissed off, things just get worse and worse for me. Then again, that might just be, I might just have answered my own question, solved my own mystery there. Anger does not help. But god damn it, it feels good sometimes. Okay. Okay, sorry for all the delay, ladies and gentlemen, but at last we are finally getting into this. And again, we're starting from issue 74, Marvel Star Wars 1977. And we have Mr. Joe Duffy on script and plot. And we have, I guess layouts means like the main like panels in the initial drawing and stuff. And that goes to Mr. Ron Frenz. And we have a 3-part storyline this time. The Iskalon arc. So the previous, sort of the last issue that I ended, the last stream on, number 73, there were 2 rebel agents that had gone missing and that Luke and Leia were being sent to find them. They kind of found that one was dead and that his tapes had been stuck in this city on this weird little planet with these tiny furry creatures that turn into like hulked out wolfmen when they hit puberty. It's that kind of weird. At any rate, we're now looking for the second of these 3 agents. And let me just make sure I've got this guy's name right. Tay Vanis. That's the guy's name. And he was last seen in the local system. His last contact was from this world called Iskalon, which is an ocean world. And so we kind of start the story with Luke just admiring the scenery, which is just so alien to a guy who grew up on a desert world. They're of course the droids are with them, as are Chewie and Lando. Well, Leia is of course again, worrying over Han, because this is once again something the Rebel Alliance has diverted them from the search for Han to look for these 2 people. But Luke has to act, and so in a rare moment, Luke has to remind her that that they signed on, that when they decided to join the Rebel Alliance, they did it to help all that they could, not just those that they cared about personally. And it's kind of interesting because at this point we have been seeing a few more and more moments of Leia's personal vulnerability of late, and I think this is mainly because now that they've actually, I guess, really once the Rebel Alliance gave them enough time to like start looking for Han Solo, I guess a lot of the barriers and the self-control that Leia has been using to hold herself together since Alderaan was destroyed are just starting to come crashing down in a way. Well, not crashing down, that's too extreme, but it's definitely, she's letting that affect her more than before. Or, let me just look here. Okay, so things are still going fine. At least that's that. God damn it. Anyway, it's soon afterwards that they meet one of the locals of Iskalon. His name is spelled M-O-N-E, so I don't know if it's Mon or Monet. But anyway, apparently he knows Lando from way back, though it's never explained exactly what their connection is, except the fact that they are old friends. And basically, the Iskalonians are this very collectively minded race. They all live together in this community that's called the School. And this really is, a school of fish. And it's led by Mon's father, Primor. And the way that they explain how the school functions is that while technically the leader of the school is followed to an extent, and it's not an absolute. At the end of the day, the leader of the school is meant to essentially do what the school wants. So it's kind of a weird tug of war kind of thing, a kind of political tension where the leader can direct the school, but the school also has like its own political force and momentum, and in the end, the leader has to go along with it. I guess it really just depends on the exact situation and the context. It's never fully described. But anyway, Mon is friendly, and his father is too. And the idea is that while there was contact by Tay Vanis, yes, I got his name right, on Iskalon, his last recorded sighting was on one of Iskalon's neighboring planets in System. And let me make sure I've got the name right. Gamondar. And the idea is that Luke and Leia will stay behind on Iskalon because they are just too recognizable for the Empire, because the Empire controls Gamondar. So in other words, it's going to be Lando, Chewie, and the droids, who are basically going to look for the missing rebel agent and any important data he may have acquired. Mon actually decides to go with them, partly because he knows his way around Gamondar, being one of the few Iskalonians to willingly leave his world, if only temporarily, and he figures he can help be Lando's guide there and avoid run-ins with the Empire. We're also briefly introduced to Mon's wife, Kendall. And basically she's just there to, wish her husband goodbye. However, it turns out that things aren't quite as nice as they seem. Because for one thing, while the Iskalonians are fully aquatic and are perfectly comfortable living under the ocean all the time, they do have these platforms that are set up so that the non-aquatic races that they just call air breathers can live in relative comfort. And Luke and Leia are going to stay on one of these places while Lando, Chewie, and the droids are off to Gamondar. But it turns out the Empire's got spies even on Iskalon, and one Imperial agent overhears the rebels talking and immediately slips away right before Lando, Chewie, Mon, and the droids go off to Gamondar. As such, well, actually, no, that's a bit later. That's a bit ahead of myself, and I want to avoid that. In the meanwhile, Primor, because, he's very much a friendly man, and he basically decides to give Leia and Luke sort of a tour of sorts. They get into scuba gear here and go around. Well, no, not quite. Well, yeah, but yeah, at one point they do go out in the scuba gear and sort of explore a few places. However, as again we've established, there is an Imperial presence on Iskalon, they just don't. There's just not much on a water world to really interest the Empire, so it's not occupied. So unlike Gamondar, Iskalon is not under occupation. There are like some stormtrooper patrols, but apart from that, the Empire mostly just has agents like the one that spied on our heroes, basically just so that the Empire can keep an eye on things. So we get to Gamondar along with Lando and his party, and we are also briefly introduced to what's the bastard's name? Some of these names are just so many of these names, so many places, they're all so forgettable. Admiral Tower, there we go. Oh, he's basically the Imperial in charge in Gamondar, and there's not much to him except that he has a pretty cool cybernetic eye that looks like it's got a built-in targeting reticule. But anyway, Lando's party arrives, and much to Moan's horror, Gamondar is completely unrecognizable to him, so he's not going to be much use as Lando's guide, because apparently Moan had been there before the Imperial occupation. It's also worth noting that on the way to Gamondar, he and Lando reminisce a bit about their past, though again, not many details. And it's revealed that Moan was always sort of the adventurous and somewhat reckless member of the school. He was kind of not deviant isn't the right word, but he was definitely not normal by Iskalonian standards. He was a lot more interested in what lay beyond his world, whereas most of his kind were just content to live where they were and not bother with the wider galaxy. And Lando's just remarking on how now Moan's become a family man. And he's not quite the free. He's still like adventurous, and he's still more adventurous than his kind, than the general run of Iskalonians, but he's not the same free spirit he once was before. Anyway, so he's as if to make things. Darn it! I'm tripping all over myself. Anyway. Thanks to that Imperial agent spying on them back on Iskalon, by the time they get there, the Imperials already know who they are and are ready for them. So not only... and the reason... what Lando and the others are looking for, their best lead on Tay Vanis, the missing agent, is this droid that was supposed to be with him. And initially, they find the droid... And, god dang it, what's its designation? K3XP. Unfortunately, it turns out that initially they think that they found the right lead, but it turns out KPX3 is not Vanis's droid, and in fact works for the Empire. So very quickly, Moan, Lando, Chewie, and the droids wind up in a cell. Meanwhile, Tower decides that it's time to punish the Iskalonians for harboring notable rebels like Leia and Luke, and decides to basically send a giant missile shooting all the way from his fleet, his great flagship, I should say, which patrols the local system, to Iskalon itself, causing blowing up the pavilion where Luke and Leia are, and causing a massive tidal wave. There's this thing they mention called the Iskalon effect, but I don't know what that means, except that, it's just a tidal wave. There's nothing special about a tidal wave being caused by a massive impact. But anyway, Luke and Leia manage to survive, but Primor, Moan's father, is killed because in the impact he's sort of smashed up against the glass of the pavilion. Yeah. And so, while the rebels are trying to ponder what to do, two Iskalonians arrive. Kendall, Moan's husband, No, Moan's wife. Drat. Moan's wife. And this other Iskalonian by the name of... Darn it, what is his name? Damn it, there's just... Kiro. That's it, Kiro. Sorry, guys. This is just the one thing about I've realized with a comic series this long, there's just so many places and so many names to keep track of, and I just can't. Anyways, Kiro is a little more violent than Kendall, but in fact he accuses the female of being the one that betrayed them to the Empire and thus caused Tower to fire the missile. And in fact, this turns out to be true. Kendall basically sold Luke and Leia out to the Empire in the hopes that it would they would spare her people any trouble. The thing about the Iskalonians is that most of them are completely unfamiliar with even the concept of duplicity and deceit. And so, more fool Kendall, she actually believed that Tower would, honor his side of the bargain. But of course, like most Imperial officers, Tower is a bastard. And so, why would he honor his deal with the Iskalonians? Of course, this is before they established the idea that the Empire is xenophobic, so and it's kind of interesting if there would have been any significant difference to the storyline had that been established. But anyway, Kendall, because she is able to get the school on her side, and the reasons that aren't quite explained, she decides to sick the school on Luke and Leia, and Kiro is the only one who can get them to safety. So, again, I'm not sure why they would go this way. You would think that given that the Empire broke its word, or Kendall would be more contrite about this. But I guess she's afraid of being punished by the school if it were ever to get out that she was the cause of however unintentionally, the cause of the destruction that was unleashed by the Empire. So maybe that's the reason why she's doing this. But anyway, Kiro was able to get Luke and Leia to temporary safety. Of course... As for Lando and the droids, let me quickly check something. Darn it. Sorry, guys. How exactly did they escape their cell? Oh, right. Right. I misspoke earlier. R2, though Lando and the others did, R2 did not end up in a cell. And that's because he basically... quietly signed in while in the process of looking for information that might lead them to Tay Vanis. He ended up being roped into a droid work detail. And so unlike the others who are still in their cell, he's got freedom of action. And so he's able to alter the records and mess with the programming so that not only is he able to free his friends from prison, they are able to basically just get back to their ship and leave without interference. Because R2 has cleared the Millennium Falcon. Now, meanwhile, Tower has contacted Darth Vader, figuring, I've got some rebels prisoner, and I've just killed Princess Leia of Alderaan and Luke Skywalker, two prominent figures of the rebellion. Unfortunately for him, that is Luke being dead is the last thing that Vader wants. Because again, his whole goal at this point is to turn Luke to the dark side. And so basically, Now, of course, Vader can sense through the Force that Luke is still alive, in fact. And so he basically reads Tower, or Vader's version of the Riot Act, and then basically just orders the stormtrooper detail nearby to execute Tower for his incompetence. So anyway, the others managed to make it back to Iskalon. There's a brief fight with a giant sea monster native to the planet because, there's just so many dead Iskalonians killed in the attack that there's just a lot of dead bodies for it to feed on. Carrion. Luke and the Kiro are able to kill the serpent, but it ends up falling onto Kendall, killing her. Of course, Mon arrives back along with Lando and the rest, and he is, devastated that not only is his wife dead, but that she literally brought about the death of his father and so many others. And this revelation pretty much seems to transform Mon on a dime. Well, it's not entirely just Mon. It's the fact that the school is, even though Kendall has been exposed as the one responsible, the school has apparently turned against the idea of having air breathers of any kind on their world. And Mon, even though he does end up taking his father's place as leader of the school, he has to go along with their will because that's the way that the relationship between the school and its leader works. And because again, it's not consistent exactly in how at what point the leader can dictate what the school does, and at what point the leader has to go along with what the school wants. But at this point, it seems it's the latter in this instance. And though he does still regard Lando as his friend, and he's not hostile toward Luke and the others, he still basically tells them, "You're no longer welcome here. You have to leave." And that brings us to chapter 7. Yeah, this was a 3-parter. We are now on chapter 77. And called The Chanteuse of the Stars. The Chanteuse is basically sort of the morally ambiguous nightclub singer. It's a film noir trope. Like if you've ever seen one of those old-timey hard-boiled detective movies where there's a girl singing in a nightclub and she's like a significant character, that's kind of what a chanteuse is. It's a profession, and it's like a character trope, an archetype. Right. Now this story, again, it's not exactly clear where in the well, yes, no, this is directly after the Iskalon thing, because, again, we're in a part where sometimes the comic jumps around a little with the timeline, and it doesn't and each event does not take place immediately one after the other. But anyway, the others have returned from the fruitless search for Tay Vanis on Iskalon and Gamindar. However, it may be that the search for that they might that they may have found a lead on Han, even if they haven't found a lead on Vanis, because they found what was it exactly? Yes, a transmission. And it's also suggested that Han may have had information on him similar to what the two missing agents had, Vanis and the other guy. And so now, finding Han is no longer just a personal thing for Luke, Leia, Chewbacca, and their immediate circle of friends. This is now a matter of alliance interest. So, there's a bit of good news and bad news here. Their best lead seems to be at a nightclub, basically. And where is it exactly? What's the place called? Damn it. Cabaret Station, that's it. And so this time the searchers are Luke and Leia and, dang it, I keep forgetting his name, Pliff, the leader of the Hoojibs, because again, the rebels are still based out of Arbra mostly. And again, just for a reminder, the Hoojibs are the natives of Arbra. They're these tiny little rabbits with bulging eyes and a little antenna thing, and they're telepaths. And they eat energy in that, they'll drain electricity from devices and energy from other things. So basically, unless there's already alternative available, they'll eat through all the power of your tech so that it stops working. So anyway, Cabaret Station, specifically a nightclub, and while Luke is basically being bombarded, by a bunch of female Zeltrons who are entertainers, and again, in the comics, Zeltrons are basically, again, as I like to say, the closest thing that Star Wars ever gets to horny on main. This is a very light story. There's not much to it because, again, it doesn't really go anywhere, even though it's set up with the idea that there might be a lead on Han. Unfortunately, it turns out this is a dead end, and in what is supposed to be a funny moment, and I guess Leia is roped into being a stage singer because she happened to be inside the actual singer's wardrobe looking for clues. And unfortunately, because there were Imperials pursuing her, she put on a wig to disguise herself, and so she was mistaken as the singer. I think it's kind of contrived and a little stupid, but one thing that is sort of funny that comes out of this is that among the audience listening in on Leia's performance, this impromptu performance, are the Lasbies from the previous stream, specifically from Chapter 63. They were from the planet where not Vanis, but the other rebel agent had gone missing. And the funny thing about Lasbies is when they hit puberty, they transform into these giant hulking wolfmen things. And apparently, one of the Lasbies in the audience on Cabaret Station is just so enamored with Leia's singing that it causes like a sexual awakening. And so he literally just turns into a giant wolfman thing. And so again, I guess it's supposed to be a lighthearted little one-off story, but there's really not much else to it. Huh? Hold up, the screen is bugging. Okay, never mind. Okay, good. For a moment there, I checked it on the stream, and it looked like the screen had frozen. I was worried that maybe the stream wasn't working. But no, it's still going. So anyway, back to more serious matters. Here's Chapter 78. This is another short one-off. And again, this is kind of before the Iskalon thing, because again, sometimes the series just doesn't, the comic series I mean, not all the chapters don't happen in chronological order. And so anyways, this particular chapter, number 78, which is called Hoth Stuff. Kind of a weird title, but anyway. Luke, Leia, and another rebel pilot named what is his name? Barlon. And so they are basically looking. They're looking for someone, but not Han this time. They're looking for Wedge Antilles. As I like to think of him, Wedge is kind of the perpetual wingman of Star Wars, in that he was even throughout the expanded universe in A New Hope, in Empire Strikes Back, in Return of the Jedi, and all the books and comics that are set afterwards, he was always sort of Luke's right-hand man, the guy that Luke could always turn to when he needed help in an official alliance capacity. Because, these two had flown together in so many missions against the Empire, they're pretty much like brothers in arms. And there's very little that Wedge would not do for Luke if the Jedi Knight asked it of him. he's very much sort of the big time loyal best friend in a way. Even though outside of the expanded universe books, he was always relegated to essentially a side character. Because I mean, in New Hope, he's only there during the Battle of Yavin. In Empire, he's only there during the Battle of Hoth, and he doesn't show up in Return of the Jedi until the Battle of Endor. So again, he's like a background character, and yet the expanded universe, mostly in comics and books, would sort of elevate him to a very significant figure within the greater Star Wars canon. And there would even be several books and comics that were dedicated specifically to him, like the Rogue Squadron series. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up, though, is that once again we've sort of we're seeing yet another artifact of this being a much older, less continuity-focused Star Wars. Because in the in the canon of the expanded universe, Wedge was from Corellia, but in Hoth stuff, this old Marvel comic, it's explicitly stated that Wedge, like Luke, was also from Tatooine. So like Biggs and Tank and all of Luke's friends. And so this is why Luke is so kind of desperate to find him in this chapter. So not only is he Luke's sort of comrade in arms in the films, and indeed as he is in later books and comics, he's also a friend that Luke's known all his life. Again, it's really interesting to look at just how different this very, very early Star Wars was. And it really shows you just how much changed when the 1990s rolled around, and thanks to Dark Empire and the first Thrawn trilogy, Lucasfilm decided to really focus on creating a serious continuity. Because this is still in that free form phase where they figured it's fine as long as it doesn't explicitly contradict the films, just do whatever. And that's clearly how the folks at Marvel operated at this time. Anyway, as they're searching, they find an old derelict rebel transport, those big, weird cylindrical overbite things that the rebels evacuated from Hoth on. Blast. So they search around, and they actually find a log that Wedge left, even though there are no life signs. So it's kind of assumed that Wedge is dead, and that this message they're finding in the log is sort of Wedge's final words before he died. And so Wedge basically tells of what happened in the immediate aftermath of Hoth. His snowspeeder was shot down by an AT-AT. He and his gunner Jansen, because for those of you who've never seen Empire, first of all, what the hell are you doing listening to me on something this relatively obscure? Go watch Empire Strikes Back. The snowspeeders are a two-man vehicle. You have to have a pilot and you have to have a gunner, specifically for the cables that they use to take out the AT-AT's legs. So Jansen was Wedge's gunner, and he was injured in the crash, though they both survived. They ended up having to take shelter in the old base on Hoth because the Empire had left soon after the rebels evacuated. And so they didn't have to worry about the Empire getting their hands on them. Wedge ended up doing most of the heavy lifting because Jansen's injuries were just too severe. He had to just remain lying down in a space. And meanwhile, Wedge basically did what he could. He scrounged any leftover supplies that were still there in the base after the evacuation, as well as, whenever possible, hunting for whatever game was available on a frozen ice ball like Hoth. Unfortunately, with the rebels gone, Wampas began moving into the cave, and one of them ended up killing Jansen while Wedge was out on one of his hunts. So it's kind of grim. It gets pretty grim at this point. And in fact, at one point, Wedge has to fight off two Wampas by himself with just his blaster. Now, he does kill one of them straight away. I mean, okay, but the other does put up a bit more of a fight. Right. Oh no, darn it. Once again, I let myself run ahead. My thoughts run ahead of myself. Oh, it wasn't Wampas that killed Jansen, but scavengers. Or specifically, spacers that had come to Hoth to pick over the base and any valuables that might be found therein. And Jansen was basically tortured to death. And so, Wedge is pretty pissed by this. So he finds the scavengers, but of course, one man with a blaster can't really do much against a small army of bastards. At least, not directly. So, because Wedge has enough mechanical skill that he was able to, maintain his own starfighter. And so what he does, he sort of sabotages several of the scavengers' vehicles while they're not looking. So either this man deserves to have his own stealth game, or these guys are just blind idiots. And so because he basically sets up one of the scavengers' vehicles to fire on their own ships, damaging several of their spacefaring vessels. Wedge manages to blast off because by this point he was able to in one of the scavengers' own ships. But just as he's leaving orbit, he runs into an Imperial patrol. Or at least it seems that way. The chapter kind of fakes you out a little here. If Wedge had been going on the course that was already pre-programmed into the computer aboard the spaceship, he would have run into the Empire. Instead, he was charting his own course while the scavengers continued following their own, so that they ended up running into the Imperial patrol and, got turned to space dust for their troubles. So Jansen is avenged. And of course, right after this, he manages... Because, he got on... Well, no, he didn't get on one of the space vessels. He got aboard one of the spacers, scavengers' vessels. He got aboard the Rebel transport, because that was one of the things the scavengers were looting. There I go again, letting my mouth run ahead of my thoughts. I really need to learn to get better at this. Yes. So anyway, the story kind of concludes with Wedge, because there's not much power left in the vessel, and there's not much supplies. So he doesn't know how long he'll be able to last. And of course, right as the log ends, Leia, Barlon, and Luke look out a window and they see Wedge in a spacesuit trying to do some repairs to the fuel cells of the transport. So it turns out he was alive, and the fact that he was outside in a vacuum suit is why there were no life readings aboard the transport. So it's a happy ending there. And it's just as well, because again, Wedge would go on to play a very prominent role in the expanded universe, and even get a lot of comics and book series names that focus specifically on him. I'm particularly looking forward to the Rogue Squadron series. That's one of the book series that I actually haven't read, but like I said, I do look forward to that because I hear they're really good. And it is nice to have Star Wars media that focuses on characters other than the core cast. So good times. Let's see. Now we move on to number 79. And we're sort of back again to continuing the search for Han. Because once again, there's this comic has no consistent chronology of events. Sometimes you'll have chapters that will jump back to something earlier. And specifically, we're focusing on Lando and Chewbacca on searching for any sign of Han. And we start on Arcan 4. And it's basically your typical urban hive of scum and villainy. So, of course, you know, Chewie and Lando are figuring, well, given that Han was a big-time smuggler, their best bet, and given that Boba Fett is a bounty hunter, their best bet on any leads to Han would be to to hunt up the nearest dive and basically start asking questions. Of course, Lando wants to be a little more subtle this go around, and so he and Chewie assume disguises and false identities. You know, Chewbacca just goes by the Wookiee. Not very imaginative, but then again, Wookiees are generally, they have this very intimidating reputation because they're such powerful fighters, and so, you know, no one's going to make fun of him for just going by the Wookiee. Lando, meanwhile, goes under the alias of Captain Drebble. And the thing is, Drebble, if I forget exactly which stream, but it's an earlier one. Drebble was this guy who really had it in for Lando because supposedly Lando cheated him once at cards. And so he's caused trouble for Lando in the past as a result, usually by, you know, sicking local bounty hunters on him. And so Lando has had this practice of just using Drebble's name whenever he goes in disguise, usually anything that might get him into trouble, because he figures, well, this way, not only will any people that I annoy not go looking for me, they'll instead cause trouble for Drebble, this guy who I don't really like all that much and who's caused trouble for me. Excuse me. And so the weird thing about Lando's disguise, though, is that he basically, clearly one of the artists for this comic. Let me see. We have, Joe Duffy is again script and plot, and Ron Friend's breakdown. Tom Palmer's finishes. So I'm guessing that's these are the guys who do like the actual drawing part, not like the inking and the lettering and stuff. And basically, whichever one of those two people was a Captain Harlock fan, because basically Lando is wearing Captain Harlock's outfit. Which is even though, you know, Harlock's overcoat is green instead of purple, but again, it's the same style of overcoat. Lando wears a wig, and apart from the fact that it's white, it's basically Harlock's hair. Captain Harlock is a very old, very prestigious manga series from Japan. Well, that was a stupid thing, oxymoron. Where else do manga come from? Damn it. But yeah, basically it was a sort of a space adventure, space opera type series, and it's it's been around a long time, has a dedicated fan base, very prestigious and influential stuff. So anyway, Lando and Chewie try to probe for information, and the way they do this is that they find a bunch of guys who are trying to steal this priceless work of art. Well, it's basically a two-part set, the Goddess and the Minstrel. And basically the way that Lando tries to enlist their help in finding Han is basically by claiming that Han Solo had a lead on where the Minstrel and the Goddess might be. So if they want to find it, they can find him. Now, of course, Lando plays it up like, well, Han Solo crossed me once before, so I figure we'll just find him and we'll torture him into telling us where these two incredibly valuable art pieces are. Unfortunately, of course, because scum and villainy are what they are, the bad guys try to double-cross Han and Chewie. Well, Lando and Chewie, dang it. And unfortunately, because first they get Lando drunk, so drunk that he actually ends up using his and Chewie's real names. So, you know, their cover is blown. Of course, you know, the bad guys were going to cross them anyway, so it's not like that was going to change their disposition towards them. And there's like a big airspeeder chase through the streets. It's pretty well presented, frankly. But of course, you know, eventually they get caught. But Because it turns out that Lando already had both the minstrel and the goddess with him the whole time. These art treasures that the criminals wanted. And when they're caught by one of the bad guys, the minstrel is exposed. Apparently the goddess isn't seen. That's only revealed onto the last panel. But luckily for Lando and Chewie, the sudden realization that this one criminal has gotten her hands on this incredibly rich, valuable piece of art basically just triggers there's like insane greed, so that she actually fires on her own side when they come, basically going, no, this is all mine, I won't let you have it. She almost goes like full Gollum with the One Ring thing. It's like, the precious. Yes. And this gives Lando and Chewie enough time to escape. Because they figure the minstrel doesn't matter to them. They've already got they already have the goddess, and either way, the art treasures aren't relevant. They were just a means by which they could, bait the search for Han Solo. But their attempt to enlist local underworld types to find him has ended in failure. Here. And again, I do sort of question the point of all these like search for Han Solo stories in the comic. I mean, it makes sense from an in-universe perspective that Luke, Leia, and the others would want to find him. But it's like, you kind of already know at this point that they're not going to find Han again until Return of the Jedi. And so it does kind of give these little search for Han stories an air of pointlessness, frankly, from a narrative perspective. It's like, at least, more like in a meta perspective. Because again, you kind of know that this isn't going to really come to anything until the next movie. And I'm guessing that even though by this point Return of the Jedi had been released in theaters, because we're well into 1983 at this point, I'm guessing these particular comic storylines had already been written and sort of plotted out by then. At least that's the impression that I get. But anyways, we're sort of back to, we come now to chapter 80, and we're back to searching for the missing rebel spy, Tay Vanis. A name I'm actually remembering. Maybe there's hope for me yet. So Luke and Leia are infiltrating an Imperial outpost. And they end up, it's Luke, Leia, and C-3PO specifically. And, they're basically hoping to find evidence of Tay Vanis in the station records. So far, it's come up nothing, but at last they do find what appears to be a lead when they come across this droid. And what's the name designation? Yes, LE-914, or Ellie for short. She's basically she's a humanoid protocol droid type like 3PO. And in fact, Ellie does provide Luke and Leia with a lead on Vanis. Unfortunately, it seemed that there was a program built into the computer to alert the Imperials if ever anyone came and entered a search for Tay Vanis. So Leia and Luke and 3PO end up having to run back to their ship in a hurry. And Ellie ends up following them. So they go down onto the local planet. Let me just quickly see if I can find its name. Oh, this one doesn't have a name. It's unidentified. Anyway, they do find Tay Vanis's X-Wing that crashed there. And from this, they also recover the data tapes that he had. Because apparently... because apparently... yeah, well, that's not relevant. Anyway... And, they find a recording, and it's in this recording that Tay Vanis reveals that Ellie is his droid. And in fact, he had basically given the tapes to her and ordered her to destroy them if help did not, because he had activated a beacon, and basically, if help didn't arrive within 2 days, Ellie was to destroy the tapes, so that at least the Empire wouldn't have them. Of course, Ellie by this point is completely right after they learn that Ellie was Tay Vanis's droid, they look around and find that Ellie's somehow has gone. She's gone off somewhere. And they have no idea why, especially if she is in fact, Tay Vanis's droid and he was with the rebellion. But anyway, their only choice now is to, well, yes, they do find a bit of a lead on Vanis of sorts, where he might be, because there is an Imperial garrison on Vanis in this old abandoned castle. Well, they manage to successfully infiltrate, and they arrive at the cell where Vanis is being held. Unfortunately, it turns out that first they find just a message from Vader, where again he basically says, "I kind of expected that you would come this far." And, the sort of taunting, "You've won nothing, rebels." And in fact, the rebels have won nothing, because it's revealed, because even though they did manage to get the tape, so it's kind of a win for them. And so Vader reveals that, the hologram of Vader disappears and reveals that Tay Vanis is basically, well, he's not dead, but he's basically brain dead. He was tortured to the point where his mind is completely gone. And, Vader obviously did this because, it would be crueler to let the man live on as a vegetable than to just kill him. And at this point, Ellie basically reappears. She does, and this is basically how the rebels get the tapes, because she still had the tapes on her, and she basically gives them to 3PO. But they try to build this. It's a very sad moment, really, where basically, even though she disobeyed Vanis's command to destroy them after a few days, because apparently she was close enough to him that she believed in his cause and wanted to believe that help would come for them. And so basically, she basically decides to die with her master, such as her dedication. So she gives the tapes to 3PO, and basically, then after Luke and Leia leave the cell, because she asked them to leave, she just self-destructs and kills Vanis. Well, because it's basically a mercy killing at this point. Because again, the dude's a vegetable, and there's no even in Star Wars, there's no coming back from that. It's pretty dark, honestly, even for post Empire Strikes Back Star Wars. And so it's a very sad ending. Luke and Leia depart, and but not before they set the reactor of the Imperial outpost to blow up, because they figure, Vanis deserves a more fitting monument than just his charred corpse and his destroyed droid in a cell. Oh, what's this? Oh, welcome back, Mr. Burgle. Apparently, according to Wikipedia, a Marvel magazine claimed that original 78 was supposed to be published before the Iskalon stuff, but got pushed back. That makes sense. I mean, I don't know anything about how comic book production works, but I imagine that, especially if it's a collaborative effort, there's a lot of issues going on, and especially with editorial oversight and stuff. It's not very. It's kind of like, well, like if you're like when you're like doing a one-man show, like if you're an author or stuff. It's a lot easier, I guess, in a way that you sort of know what you're doing and you've got it done right away. And and the editor doesn't see your manuscript until like you finish and you hand it into him, and he just says, well, you need to change this, or maybe this is no good, you need to do better. Whereas with comics, you kind of get the impression that in certain companies at certain times in their history, editors would interfere a lot with things. Sometimes to the comic's detriment, sometimes to its a benefit. But there's a lot. I get the impression there's a lot more oversight in these, particularly with a comic company as big as Marvel. But yeah, we have one of those genuine sad endings to like a one-off comic story for this for Star Wars Marvel 1977. And now we're sort of into issue 81, and we're fine. And so here, from this point forward, we're now officially post Return of the Jedi. Let me actually quickly look up the date when issue 81's publication date. December of 1983. So by this point, we're now officially past Return of the Jedi, and so the first post Return of the Jedi comic story in Marvel 1977 is basically Han Solo readjusting. Basically readjusting to life out of that carbon freeze following the Battle of Endor. There wasn't really time for him to do that sort of thing because we got the second Death Star is almost complete, and the Emperor is going to be there. We've got to launch this attack now because we can take out the Empire's leadership in one fell swoop if we strike. But now it's been a few days. Han's has had time to come down from all the excitement and the danger, and it turns out that he's really starting to come to grips with the fact that the galaxy has moved on quite a bit since he was since Bespin, and he was sent into the carbon freeze. There are a few rebels that aren't exactly pleased with him. One, because he's a smuggler, and two, apparently he owes quite a few of them money. But again, it's mostly just him readjusting. He's just not because the galaxy moved on while he was in the carbon freeze, and it was what? Let me actually check the dating here. I think it was about a year. Or at least, a year or at least a few months between Return of the Jedi and The Empire Strikes Back. So, a lot has happened since then. And there's actually sort of this nice moment where he goes to the Falcon, and he's checking basically to make sure that everything is fine just the way he left it. And at one point, Chewie walks up behind him, and, Han starts saying, no, nothing's wrong. What could possibly be wrong? But while in the midst of saying it, I do like the way that they write the dialogue. His voice you get the impression his voice breaks a little. And, Chewie just, embraces him. Because, he's Han's oldest friend, and he kind of appreciates in a way that very few others can, even Leia, just how hard it is for Han at the moment, even though he tries to hide it behind his, quippy facade. It's genuinely good stuff. But anyway, because people owe Han money and they're not willing to lend him any, Han wants to he wants to get his finances back into the black, as it were. And now that he no longer has to worry about paying the bounty on Jabba because Leia killed Jabba, that's one less thing he has to worry about, one less creditor that he owes money to. And so they go to Tatooine, because apparently there's a bank there, and Han has money there. Kind of odd. But again, this is still in that early, very nebulous era of Star Wars where they haven't established a lot of stuff. So, maybe there would be banks even in a hive of scum and villainy like Mos Eisley. However, what's really interesting about this one is that this is the first story to confirm that Boba Fett is alive, because there's a part where while Han and Leia and Chewie are going to Tatooine, they literally show Fett being spat out of the Sarlacc. Evidently, the Sarlacc did not appreciate the taste of Mandalorian armor. And apparently because, in his armor he looks indistinguishable from a droid, he's picked up by a bunch of Jawas. And he's basically unconscious. Ooh, sorry about that. Unfortunately, Han's luck refuses to improve because it seems that being frozen in carbonite is the equivalent of being legally dead, and all his assets were frozen in that particular account on Mos Eisley. So, you know, once again, Han's luck just will not improve. And apparently it takes a lot of legal red tape to get through to basically confirm in the legal sense that, yes, I'm in fact still now an active individual. You know, because again, carbon freezing is apparently equivalent to being legally dead. At any rate, R2 and 3PO are stolen by Jawas, and so Han and Leia end up having to steal some land speeders in order to go out into the desert to find them. And well, actually, no, it's just R2 that was with them. I'm sorry. They do find and wouldn't you know it, R2 is found by Jawas, exactly this was stolen by Jawas, but it's the same Jawas that have found Boba Fett. Although it seems that the bounty hunter has amnesia. He no longer remembers who he is. And he's practically, you know, like a servant of the Jawas and their sandcrawler. And so, of course, Lando and Luke... No, Han and Leia. Why am I getting them mixed up? Damn it. Why am I getting them mixed up? They managed to get aboard the sandcrawler and get R2. However, at first, Han's kind of freaked out when he sees Fett. But, you know, of course, Fett doesn't recognize him. And meanwhile, at the same time, the sandcrawler comes under attack from a bunch of sand people. And their shots damage the sandcrawler to the point where it can't maneuver, and wouldn't you know it, the sandcrawler is heading right back for the Great Pit of Carkoon. So, you know, a one-way ticket to the Sarlacc's stomach. You know, assuming the Sarlacc doesn't just spit it out afterwards. But anyway, despite himself, Han is unwilling to leave Fett behind to die, even as the Jawas escape the sinking, it's basically, you know, the rats fleeing the sinking ship. The Jawas are fleeing the sandcrawler as it heads for the pit. Ooh, sorry about that. And even though Han has an opportunity to leave Fett behind, he's unwilling to do so, and he tries to help the bounty hunter out, except that Leia keeps shouting Han's name to let him know that the Sand People are coming, and it seems the name jogs Boba Fett's memory loose, and he tries to kill Han, and of course, you know, Han just jumps clear of the sandcrawler right as it goes down into the pit. And so, you know, that's pretty much it. It's sort of the first, I guess, so this makes it the very first official story to confirm Boba Fett's survival. And, you know, it kind of makes sense. Even though for some reason, even though he had this very minor role in all 2 Star Wars movies that he appeared in, he was just so cool and had just this air of mystique about him that people, I guess the fans really, really liked him. He was so popular that, you know, LucasArts figured, well, if we're going to do other stories, we got to bring him back. So, we're now on issue 82. Luke is basically practicing with his lightsaber again. And because, you know, a Jedi never ceases training. Of course, you know, being that this is on Endor, his only practice partners are the Ewoks. But of course, you know, you could say that's not much of a challenge, but, you know, yeah, I guess, you know, then they did take on the Empire's stormtroopers and win. Though whether that reflects favorably on the Ewoks or unfavorably on the stormtroopers is one of those things that fans will doubtless debate until the end of time. So anyways, at this point, the Rebel Alliance they're calling themselves the Alliance of Free Planets at this point. I guess they haven't yet gotten to the point where they're calling themselves the New Republic. And they basically want to send, now that the Empire is kind of on the run, it's still there, but it's no longer the great dominant force in the galaxy, with Palpatine and Vader both dead. And so basically they figure, well, we're going to form a new galactic government, but, we believe in democracy. We want it to be representative of, the interests of all the sentient free species of the galaxy. And so they want emissaries to go to various planets and basically say, hey, the Empire is beaten. We're now going to basically restore essentially the values of the Republic, if not the institution itself. Would you like to be a part of it? And they decide to they ask Luke to be one of these emissaries, and they decide to send him back to Iskalon, the planet with all those fish people on it. Luke arrives, but of course, though of course he's not sure what kind of reception he'll receive, given that the last time he was there, the Iskalonians basically swore off any interaction with off-worlders. The instant that Luke arrives, though, he does find some familiar faces. The scavenger and conman Rick Duel, and his partners, Davi, the Zeltron, who is just really all over Luke, because again, Zeltrons are basically horny on main, and I will never get tired of saying that because I think it's funny, and Cheeto, the Rhodian. Apparently they did manage to finally get him out of that block of carbonite he was in at one point. They're picking over the flotsam and the wreckage that was left when the Empire caused that massive tidal wave that destroyed all of the platforms there. It seems, however, that this traumatic experience of having the Empire try to destroy so many of their people has really changed the Iskalonians, because they basically decide to lure they set out a bunch of bait to lure one of the giant sea serpents native to their world to the surface so as to kill the off-worlders for them. Luckily, Kiro, the Iskalonian that helped Luke and Leia earlier in the comic, sort of helps save them from that. And in fact, Luke is forced to try and defend Rick and company from the Iskalonians, because the school is just determined to, either kill them or drive them off. And even though Luke doesn't really think much of Rick, given that he tried to scam them the last time they worked together, he does figure that he's not just going to stand by and let the Iskalonians tear them limb from limb. Luckily, Mon and Kiro are able to basically get the others to back off, because even if the school doesn't like off-worlders anymore, at least these two are aware of the fact that the rebellion is not their enemy, at the very least. But even so, the Iskalonians are still they've decided to become very insular as a result of what happened to them. They are not in any way interested in interacting with off-worlders, let alone join the Alliance of Free Planets. And you can really see that Mon has changed a great deal since then. And it kind of makes sense, because one, his father was killed as a result of the Imperial bombardment of his world, and two, he learned at the end that his own wife was responsible, unintentionally, albeit unintentionally, for the Imperial attack. And so he's very much a much colder, a much sadder, more hardened leader. Because, not only did he lose several loved ones and find out that one of them sort of brought about the destruction and death of so many, he now has had to shoulder the burden of being leader of the school. Well, though he does tell Luke that if you ever see Lando again, tell him that the memory of our earlier times sort of are a comfort to me, and they help me get through the days. It's kind of weird because there's not much else to Mon in either this story or the major Iskalon arc at the beginning of the stream, but the writing, but somehow, even though he's had such a brief and minor role, you really do sort of get the idea of of his state of mind, and you actually kind of feel for him. This poor guy had to endure so much in such a short span of time, and just how much this experience has changed him, has made him become a lot, in many ways, like not physically but mentally and intellectually old before his time. He's had to mature in the worst possible way because circumstances have forced him to do so. And for some reason, despite the fact that again there's so little to him, I actually felt kind of sad reading this part. You know, this thing where he refers to the more innocent days of his youth. I don't know how they pulled it off, but they genuinely do make me feel sad for him. Anyway, though, you know, Luke decides to at least, you know, escort Rick, Danny, and Chido off Iskalon. Because, again, nobody's welcome here. And but Kiro, it seems, decides that he wants to go with Luke, so he sort of dons this special suit that will allow him to breathe water off, and you know, on planets. Because the thing about the Iskalons is that while they can only be out of water for so long before they asphyxiate, it's kind of like the equivalent of them holding their breath. And so Kiro needs to wear this full suit with like a helmet containing a lot of water in it just so that he can live off planets. But he's determined to see the galaxy, the worlds beyond his own. And so, you know, the story ends with their departure. And, you know, because the Iskalonians are so collectivist, because the school is pretty much almost like a hive mind kind of thing, most of them just can't conceive of why Kiro would want to leave. And they're like, how can one leave behind the school? Won't he miss his old life? But, you know, Moan, who when he was younger did a little off-world traveling of himself, he obviously understands Kiro a bit more than the rest, and he does say not as much as we will miss him, but he's more accepting of Kiro wanting to, you know, go forth and learn something of the wider universe. You know, it's decent, and you know, it's nice to see this, to get a few more recurring characters, and like we've brought, you know, Rick and his gang back, even though they're not the nicest of people. It's still pretty interesting to see Marvel reuse these characters and have them come back over and over again. And it's kind of interesting the way that they do this, because like when I first started reading this comic, apart from like the major characters, I honestly didn't expect much. But you know, I wasn't expecting that much of an emphasis on continuity, even if it's nowhere near to the same degree as you know, the post-90s expanded universe often would get to be. Sorry about that. Okay. Now we're on chapter 83, and it's another sort of a one-off. And this time, we're focusing solely on Lando. He's the only guy here. And this time, and again, this sort of ties in a little bit to the previous chapter. The Rebel Alliance, well, Alliance of Free Planets, I should say. They want emissaries to try and get people, you know, to join their new, you know, this new government they're planning that they hope will be a lot more representative and democratic than the Empire was. And so, you know, while Luke was sent off to Iskalon, Lando goes to this place called Drogheda, which is weird because due to like random trivia, I know that Drogheda is the name of a city in Ireland. And I think that's kind of weird because like it's named after an Irish city, this planet, whether by coincidence or not, and yet no one is written with an Irish accent, even though the Mandalorians are. Yeah, I forget exactly which stream. I think it was the previous one, stream number 6. They write the Mandalorians to have Irish accents. So anyway, right now there are... Oh, it seems Lando's got some history. The reason he was sent to Drogheda is because Lando's got some history there. He and then Princess Sarna, now Queen, were sort of an item back in the day. And, they figured this might, it might be easier for Lando to persuade her to join in. However, it turns out that right now, the monarchy of Drogheda is being challenged by revolutionaries. And Lando arrives along with Sarna's sister Danu, because she's basically his liaison. And basically Sarna tells Lando that the revolutionaries are with the Empire. So obviously, the Imperial Remnant, I should say at this point. I don't think they were using the Imperial Remnant yet at this point in the Star Wars history. But basically, obviously Empire bad, can't have that. And so Lando basically agrees to work with her to quell the revolutionaries. Yes. And so he works alongside Danu, who's like the younger sister of Queen Sarna, as well as the captain of the guard, Harlech. Now Lando is able to discover where the revolutionaries are, that they're in a mine, and so he immediately has a plan on how to deal with them. However, we soon discover that not all is as it seems, though they don't reveal all the cards just yet. Once Lando is out of the room, Sarna and Danu have a sort of an argument about this whole thing. So clearly, there's some things that they're hiding from Lando. Not all is as it seems on Drogheda. And so Lando, when he finds where the revolutionaries are hiding out, he basically decides to infiltrate the mine because he knows that there's a large body of water nearby. Right. And then if he basically sabotages some mining equipment, it will basically cause the water to flood into the tunnels, thus flushing out the revolutionaries, so that Harlech and his men can capture them. So Lando sneaks in through the back entrance while telling Harlech and his men to wait at the front entrance, because that's basically where the revolutionaries will be flushed out. Lando does get caught by the revolutionaries, but not before he manages to cause the flooding in the tunnels. And of course, as expected, the revolutionaries flee towards the surface, where Harlech and his men are waiting for them. But to Lando's shock, even though he insisted that the revolutionaries be taken alive, Harlech's men are gunning them down. And it's really around this point where Lando starts to realize that someone is stringing him along. It might be Harlech, but it might also be Sarna as well. And in fact, shortly afterwards, when he goes to a tavern because he's he's trying to drown his frustrations, he overhears some of Harlech's men talking about the revolution. Reveal that the revolutionaries want to create a democracy. That's the whole reason why they're working with Sarna. In fact, they're not affiliated with the Empire at all. And so, not only does Lando feel the fool that he was played, there's also the fact that even though he he's joined the rebellion at this point, and while he's not, he's like Han, he's not a big believer in the cause like Leia and Luke are, but he's still. His sympathies are more in line with the rebellion and with the idea of opposing tyranny and overthrowing tyrannical governments. And if what else can if the monarchy doesn't want a democracy, it could well be that it's because it's tyrannical, and so he turns against Sarna. And it actually revealed that Danu, the younger sister, is actually working with the revolutionaries. She was their contact, in fact. And as a consequence, after Lando manages to take Queen Sarna hostage, and the revolutionaries come in and bust in and subdue Harlech and his men, and Danu basically decides steps in, and basically she'll be the one in charge of the transition from monarchy to democracy, because apparently she's is fine with abolishing her family's monarchy. However, she's not yeah, she basically gives Lando unfortunately, Lando was expecting a payday as well, because he was originally there just to try and convince Dragotta to join the Rebel Alliance. Helping put down the revolutionaries was outside of his mission statement. And so he was sort of charging a fee for his assistance. Of course, the revolutionaries have won. And basically Danu says, I'll give you basically a little bit of money, not nearly what my sister was going to pay, and you've got 10 seconds to leave. Yeah, apparently, just like the Escalonians, the people of Dragotta want nothing to do with extragalactic affairs. So Lando, and of course, however, Danu basically says, but I'll pay you more if you take my sister off planet with you. Because, we don't want her here in case she should try to restore the monarchy. And so, basically, Lando gets some money for his troubles and a very angry ex-girlfriend. And that he now has to share the cockpit with on the trip back to Endor. It's not terrible by any means, but it's one of those storylines that's pretty short and pretty average. Now, number 84. This one is a bit of an interesting one, and this is sort of a Han Solo-centric one. Because, once again, Han may have joined the rebellion, but again, at the end of the day, he's ultimately out for himself. And this is consistent even in the later expanded universe. Han will always prioritize his friends and later on his family over, whether the interests of the New Republic, in fact. Because, Han's not big on causes, but he is big on people. People that he knows and cares about. Out. And so we, at this point, though, he's interested in, again, making some money because he doesn't have any at this point, as we've established in one of I think it was either 82 or 81. Yes, it was 81. Because, and they didn't get any money from on Tatooine because Han's accounts were all frozen and he nearly got shot by Fett. So, not much was gained from that particular expedition. So, Chapter 84 begins with Han playing cards because, it's a less risky way to win money. I say than, smuggling. I say less risky because you never know if either if you're caught out at cheating or someone just decides to be a sore enough loser, you can still possibly get a blaster to the face for your troubles. And that kind of is what happens here. There's no indication that Han cheated, so his opponent was just a really sore loser. But basically, Han manages to deprive his opponent of everything he owns, including this fancy, wholly expensive crystal and a map to this planet called Sol 5. And it's literally spelled just like the name of the South Korean capital. So, and again, one of those weird, either it's a weird coincidence or someone just decided to make it named after a real place because just because. And basically the guy whom he won all this stuff from had planned to go back, had been part of the Empire's scouting corps. And he discovered these priceless crystals on Sol 5 and had planned to go back, but then the war happened. And so that was kind of scuppered. So Han and Chewie basically, now that they have the map and the crystal, the guy tries to shoot them for it when he loses, because again, he's a sore loser, but Chewie just kicks his ass. Because Wookiees are always very good at kicking ass. At least in close quarters combat anyway. And so our favorite duo head off to Sol 5. The problem, though, is that the Empire is there too, and they're also on the lookout for those hyper-valuable crystals. And so Han ends up going by himself because, Chewbacca might stand out a bit too much in case it's inhabited. And it turns out it is. But anyway, it's mostly Han going solo, as it were. And he ends up finding the crystals by following the clues that the guy he swiped the crystal from had left in his data pad. And so he does find the crystals, though most of them have already been taken by the Empire. He also finds a pair of archaeologists who had found them. Who basically had found the crystals first. And of course, they're true archaeologists. They just want the crystals for academic purposes, not for any monetary gain. But of course, Han has to shoot his way past the Empire and the Imperials. And the weird thing, though, is the weird caveat this time is that the head Imperial officer is this big psychic cat man. Like, he literally is a telepath and he projects stuff into people's minds. Usually fear and pain in order to subdue them. However, as the guy that Han beat at the card table revealed earlier in the chapter, the strange crystals of Soul 5 can temporarily boost innate mental abilities. Which, when you think about it, especially if you're familiar with the later books, is basically is kind of like the Spice Glitter Stim. Yeah. It gives a temporary boost to your telepathy in that way. Okay. And so basically Han is able, because the crystal boosts Han's own mental abilities, he's able to temporarily subdue the giant cat man. His name is Sk. It's literally just a bunch of S's and a K, so don't expect me to get the pronunciation right. At all. But, Han basically, yes, he overloads a computer panel that exposes the crystals to intense heat, which apparently causes them to blow up. So he and the archaeologists are able to escape back to the Falcon. Chewie does their classic hurry takeoff. And that's that. It's a pretty simple one-off story. And it's kind of like it's Indiana Jones-ish vaguely, but because it's only one chapter, it's not really, it doesn't have enough time to really make it interesting. And that's sort of the great weakness with a lot of these one-off Star Wars comic lines. They've got really interesting ideas and concepts, but apart from like the big arc events like Iskalon or like the bit with Shira Bree, the comic doesn't really give these storylines enough time to really develop. I mean, they're fun little vignettes, but, there's not much else to them. Okay, let me see. Okay, we got plenty of liquid. We can do at least 2 more chapters. We're on chapter 85 now, and we sort of come back to a very familiar face. Drebel, the guy that tried to sick a bunch of people on Lando and Luke back on Stenos in an earlier stream, and the guy that Lando has been sort of using his name as a cover whenever he goes into disguise, hoping that any of the trouble he causes under the guise of Captain Drebel will rebound upon the actual Drebel. And, Drebel still has it in for Lando because supposedly the guy cheated him. And we're never really told if Lando really cheated him at cards or not. It's kind of left up in the air. I guess it's possible. But then again, just as, with Han, it could just as well be that the guy was a sore loser. So anyway, we then cut back to Endor, and fittingly enough, we cut immediately to Lando, Chewie, Han, and 2 of the Ewoks playing cards. And in fact, Chewie's just lost a hand, and, Lando insists that he didn't cheat when Chewbacca accuses him of doing so, and given how much Wookiees can be really sore losers, see, you know, the famous holo chess scene from A New Hope. It's just as well that Chewbacca considers Lando a friend, otherwise he would have likely pulled the former administrator of Bespin's arms out of their sockets. So anyway, the card game gets interrupted by a big announcement. And the rebel lead, because we're still on Endor, and the rebel leadership, Mon Mothma, Admiral Akbar, and apparently the announcement is that there is someone who is, though not part of the rebellion, has caused so much trouble for the Empire that we're basically going to give him a commendation. We're going to basically give him like a hero's reward. And wouldn't you know it, the name is Captain Drebel. Because again, all the stuff that Lando did, particularly the stuff where he was in disguise, when he was in disguise and usually causing trouble for the Empire, was under the guise of Captain Drebel. And so it seems that Lando's plan to basically screw over Drebel has just backfired royally in his face. If anything, the man's now going to get now instead of getting hunted down by Imperials and thrown into a detention block, the rebels are going to give him a reward. Let me check something here. And so basically decide, okay, we're going to give Drebel a medal, essentially. Who are we going to send to deliver it to him? Both Lando and Han volunteer, mostly because the world where Drebel happens to be on, called Kioran, is near to Kashyyyk, Chewbacca's homeworld. Because, obviously this is post-holiday special, and even though Lucas himself would disavow it, a lot of the aspects of Wookiee life in Kashyyyk, and specifically Chewbacca's family, his wife, son, and father, would be retained as canon in the continuity. And so they figure, well, hey, fine, Drebel gets his medal, but we can also use this as an excuse to, give Chewbacca an excuse to go back home. Because, Chewbacca would like to see his family again, but, he swore a life debt to Han. And what's more, since he is, and by now, at this point, though it's not mentioned in the comics, but it is mentioned in later books, Chewbacca later extended his life debt to Han to Leia and Luke. And possibly even Lando, though that's never really made clear. So anyway, by this point, basically, yeah, Chewbacca would love to go back home, but he feels that he can't leave the rebellion while there's still an enemy to fight. Because, the Imperial remnant's still there. The Empire did not just up and disappear after Endor just because Palpatine was dead. And, Wookiees take their word of honor and their sense of duty very seriously. And so basically, Lando and Han see this as an opportunity to basically give Chewie an excuse to see his family again. Which is nice of them. So they end up going to Kioran, though of course naturally they almost have a run-in with several bounty hunters like Bosk and IG-88, and who would very much like to nail Lando and Chewie to a wall given the trouble they caused them earlier in the comic. And so they're trying their best to avoid the bad guys until they can find Drebel. Unfortunately, they do find him, and Drebel immediately decides that he wants Lando dead or alive. Hold on, one other thing. Oh no, once again, my damn mouth got ahead of my thoughts. They're not going to Kioran to give Drebel his medal. Although, you know, the rebellion does plan to basically give him commendations as a hero of the rebellion. Because again, and thanks to Lando using his name as a disguise, Drebel's getting all the credit for the stuff he did against the Empire. They're going to Kioran because, again, it's all part of the diplomatic missions to basically ask planets if they want to be in on the Alliance of Free Planets. That's really what this is all about. And so Han volunteers to go to Kioran, again, mostly because it's on the way to Kashyyyk. So again, Chewie can see his family. And, you know, Lando volunteers, and interestingly enough, Lando does mention his ship, but at this early stage in the story in the Star Wars expanded universe, his ship isn't the Lady Luck; it's the Cobra, which is kind of interesting. So anyway, they do, yes, before they have their almost run-in with Bosk and IG-88, they do meet with the leader of Kioran. And the thing about Kioran, it is called the Hunter's Moon because it's a place where a lot of bounty hunters gather. And so the leader of Kioran is basically the biggest crime lord. Or, you know, the closest thing to one. And so, you know, Han and Lando do the diplomacy thing. The Kioran leader basically goes, yeah, that sounds it. You know, we could do good business with the Alliance. I'm in. And then they have the near run-in with Bosk and IG-88, and that's when they run into Drebel, and he basically calls for their blood. Or at least Lando's blood, anyway. They manage to make it back to the Falcon, but unfortunately Drebel is one step ahead and is already there. You know, because of course, you know, Drebel figured if they've gotten away, eventually they're going back to their ship. And you know, the Millennium Falcon's pretty distinctive. Unfortunately, not only do they had to run into Bosk, IG-88, and Drebel, they also end up running into the those criminals that were going to steal that priceless art treasure from earlier that Lando tried to basically sucker into helping them find Han way back when. And apparently, the criminals still believe that Han has a lead on that famous priceless art treasure, the goddess. And so, while basically they're fine with Drebel taking his vengeance on Lando, they lay claim to Han and Chewie because, you know, they figure he's our lead and we're gonna, you know, do what Lando, in disguise as Captain Drebel, suggested they do: find Han and basically torture him into talking. Of course, you know, torture, or they're obviously not going to show that, and they basically just had them suspended from the ceiling with these weird restraint things. I guess the idea is that the pain of loss of circulation and their joints, but apparently it's not so painful that Han and Chewie can't just talk casual. So I do have to question if it really is torture they're doing, or just, you know, an uncomfortable way of restraining them. Let me see. Of course, Han is a quick thinker. And even though he's not exactly happy with Lando for basically or however unintentionally setting these assholes on his trail, he is able to get his way out of it by saying that Drebel actually has the goddess, you know, that statue that they're so eager to get their hands on. Meanwhile, Lando's basically being held captive aboard the Falcon by Drebel, and he's basically preparing to inflict all kinds of unpleasantness upon everyone's favorite former administrator of Cloud City, when Mon Mothma makes that official pronouncement declaring Drebel to be a hero of the rebellion. And of course, this is at that exact moment where the criminals have arrived back at the Falcon, demanding the goddess from them. Well, specifically demanding the goddess from Drebel, because that's what Han told them. And of course, by now Han and Chewie have escaped, because let's face it, most prison guards in any kind of adventure story are almost required to be incompetent. And so, of course, now the Falcon is under siege as Drebel, some of the bounty hunters like Bosk and IG-88, and, in fact, Lando are sort of preparing for the big assault. And, in fact, when Lando basically comes up with an alternative idea. Now, let me make sure I've got his plan right. Well, yeah, he doesn't really have a plan. He just says that he has one. And, it'll help if you take the binders off. Because, his plan is to just ditch Drebel at the first possible chance. Of course, that's when Lando and Chewie arrive. And so there's a brief three-way firefight between everybody. Until some of Drebel's hirelings, which includes some Stenaxis, he must have paid them a lot to get them to leave their homeworld, managed to beat most of the criminals until only the leaders are basically left alive. And of course, Lando, Drebel says, well, okay, that's that. Where's my commendation? And of course, Lando had sort of claimed to Drebel that he was here to deliver the commendation to him. But of course, he had done no such thing. But of course, just like Han, Lando thinks fast. And if you recall from that episode with the dancing goddess and the minstrel, Lando already has the dancing goddess statue on him. And so he just walks out, hands it to Drebel, and says this is his commendation. And he says, enjoy it in good health and always remember you've earned whatever fortune it brings you. So again, Lando's maybe hoping that Drebel's possession of the statue will get him into trouble, especially since the criminals obviously recognize it as the thing they were looking for all this time. So who knows? But maybe Drebel will appear in a later story arc. Okay, the last one for the stream. And this is actually a pretty interesting one because most of the time, as I've said repeatedly, a lot of these one-off stories have interesting premises, but they don't last. But because they're only one chapter, they're not around long enough to really flesh it out and make it compelling. And chapter number 86, written, because this is a pretty special one, written by Mr. Randy Stradley. Oh, yes. I've mentioned him a couple of times because he was mostly an editor in the 90s for Dark Horse, when particularly on the Star Wars license. Yes. But anyway, I say this because Chapter 88 is sort of a textbook example of, again, these one-off chapters that have interesting concepts and stories, but just they're not long enough to really make them compelling as they could have been. And this really is sort of, like I said, it's a textbook example of this. So, it's Leia is on a diplomatic mission for the rebellion, probably her, well, again, the Alliance, I should say. And this time, it's to a planet that some people might be familiar with, particularly if you were into the prequel era, the Yinchor. Now, this is a bit of a fascinating thing. Because the Yinchor only feature briefly in this chapter, but they end up playing a significant role in Star Wars history. In sort of the Old Republic, in the Old Republic days, shortly before the Clone Wars, the Yinchor are this incredibly militant race, and they have this unique ability where they are incredibly resistant to Jedi mind tricks. And so they have this, and so they're sort of launching this war against the Old Republic, and in fact Mace Windu plays a key role in taking them down. But this is obviously much later. The Yinchor are just a background alien race in this one-off chapter, and there's really not much to them. They're not around long enough to get a feel for what kind of people they are. But otherwise, they do sort of, and even the appearance is kind of different, because apart from being very reptilian, these Yinchor look more like turtles, whereas the Yinchor, as they are depicted in later Old Republic comics, are more saurian, like dinosaur-like. So anyway, Leia's going off on the mission. Luke is worried because, you know, the Empire is pretty active. The Imperial Remnant, I should say, is pretty active in this region. And so, and the thing is, Leia refuses to bring a blaster with her because weapons are not allowed in the presence of the Yinchor elders. And you know, she basically figures, well, of course I'm going to agree to their demands. How can we convince them that the Alliance is to be trusted if they won't, if we don't keep our end of the bargain? Oh no, wait, this actually is still the rebellion. I just saw an editor's note that this story takes place before Return of the Jedi. So again, we're sort of bouncing around the timeline a little in this one. Unfortunately, it turns out that the Yinchor had only agreed to bring Leia to their planet, the Inchori, I should say, had only agreed to bring Leia to their planet of Yinchor because the Empire has already captured their elders, and basically they were willing to offer them back in exchange for Leia being delivered to them. But of course, once they arrive in system, the Yinchor basically try to subdue Leia so that they can do the hostage exchange. But of course, the Empire is the Empire, which is to say, a bunch of scummy bastards, and the Empire just opens fire on them. Because of course, they ultimately want Leia dead. And so, you know, if they have to they're not going to lose any sleep if they blow up a few aliens in order to get her. So the ship ends up crash landing. All three of the Yinchor die. Though luckily, before the crash, Leia is able to send activate that distress beacon that Luke insisted on her taking with her. So at least help is on the way. However, along with the Yinchor ship, one of the ties is also shot down. And a stormtrooper, kind of inaccurate, they should have been wearing a TIE pilot outfit. But whatever, a stormtrooper arrives on the scene, and despite being ordered to kill everybody aboard the shuttle, upon seeing Leia, he actually seems to recognize her and decides not to kill her on the spot. Though this is kind of I don't know if it's a plot hole, but it's kind of weird that he wouldn't do this, given what we find out later. Apparently he's just decided that he's going to hand her over as a prisoner. And it's revealed that in fact this stormtrooper, his name is never given, but he's from Alderaan. And so, you know, Leia is obviously shocked and horrified, and it actually is well done the way that it's revealed that he's from Alderaan. And it makes sense that Leia would be shocked, given that Alderaan was destroyed by the Empire. Like, Tarkin made no secret of what he was doing when he blew up that planet. And so, obviously, like Leia, the reader is left wondering, what would an Alderaanian be doing fighting for the Empire? And so, unfortunately, we sort of come to what is, again, the big weakness of the story. The fact that this chapter is one chapter is not sufficient for this. It's too short. Because as the pair are journeying and trying to survive in the hostile environment of Yinchor, which is mostly like a baked desert canyon planet, and, you know, they're fighting off local predators, among other things. most of the conflict is sort of the back and forth argument between Leia and the Stormtrooper. Because, obviously she views him as a traitor to his people and his world. And the main arguments that this particular Stormtrooper brings up is, well, one, I grew up in poverty, whereas you were a hoity-toity princess. What did Alderaan ever do for me? The Empire gave me a home and a purpose. They put food on my table. Oh, and I'm better off serving the Empire than I ever was back home. Now, this is it's an interesting argument. I think this might be one of the first times that the morality of the Empire is made is given any sort of shades of gray. And I don't know if this is the first time this is done, because this would only be like a year or so after. Well, no, but just under a year after Return of the Jedi premiered. So it is kind of interesting that they would have this sort of thing, where you have like an Imperial who's sort of a loyal Imperial making the case for his side. The problem is that the Stormtrooper, again, partly because of the brevity, and unfortunately there's also a bit of sort of bad writing here, he's not, he doesn't really have many good arguments. They don't explore the whole, what did Alderaan do for me as opposed to what the Empire's done for me. Because the next time they sort of really dispute the point, he doesn't bring it up again when Leia challenges him about it. He just reverts to the "I'm a soldier, I'm only following orders." And that's not an excuse that holds water for most people, especially if you're familiar with, say, the Nuremberg trials. That was a classic excuse that a lot of Nazis made during that. And again, I kind of wonder why they went with this, why they abandoned sort of the fact that this guy grew up in such poor circumstances compared to Leia. And that would get at least it gives him a more believable reason to be disinclined to think kindly of his world if as he feels it didn't do anything for him. And in fact, just to partly to taunt Leia and partly to drive home his point, right? He shows her that he carries like a fragment of Alderaan around his neck. Don't know how he would have gotten his hands on it. It's like a tiny little lump of stone. And he basically says, this is all that's left of your dream. Because he figures Leia just doesn't like the Empire because the hoity-toity princess doesn't get to be in charge anymore. Because obviously he assumes the worst of the enemy, as like a lot of soldiers tend to do. But again, they don't give him many good arguments, even if they're wrong arguments. If you're going to have an Imperial character make the case for the Empire, he should have better arguments than what he's given. Because again, they don't really go into much detail about how his hard life on Alderaan and just where that angle could be explored. Again, they just go, for whatever reason, they abandon that and default to the I'm only following orders shtick. But of course, as usual, when he finally does deliver Leia to his superiors, they decide that we're going to have her killed anyway, and of course we're going to kill the Yinchor elders. Or even if they're no longer a threat to us. Because hell, we're the Empire, we're evil, scummy bastards. And this is what finally, of course, convinces the Stormtrooper to turn against the Empire. Luke and the Millennium Falcon arrives at the nick of time to save Leia. Unfortunately, the Stormtrooper dies tragically while trying to help Leia escape. And all that she has left of him is that little necklace with the tiny lump of stone from Alderaan. And the chapter ends, this nameless man who sacrificed everything, including his life, so that her dream might live. Like I said, this story had a lot of great potential, But again, because it's only the one issue, and again, because they don't give the Stormtrooper a really strong argument for his case, like they bring, like again, if you're going to bring up a pro-Empire stance, you at least need to make it feel like these are believable arguments that would like hold up in a debate, at least to a degree, even if you're going to obviously have Leia be proven right. But again, it's because it's one chapter, and because they for whatever reason they just decide to abandon the more reasonably compelling argument of what has my world ever done for me, whereas the Empire has done a lot for me and I benefited a great deal from it. And to the I'm just obeying orders, I'm just a soldier. But yeah, that is it for tonight's stream. Hopefully things will be better for the next, and it's going to be like the second to last stream, I think, because depending on how quickly these last few stories wrap up, I might be able to actually finish them all before New Year's. That would be nice. I don't expect to, but you know, it would be nice. So yeah, that we're sort of coming into the home stretch of Marvel Star Wars 1977. Once again, I hope you all had a very Merry Christmas, and I look forward to seeing you again in a couple days' time. Until then.